Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. In this panel discussion, we will discuss UNT Cybersecurity with the Chief Information Security Officer of UNT. We will understand the best practices to stay cyber safe, strategies and initiatives implemented for cybersecurity by the university, and how to report a cyber incident. And also, we'll get some advice from the CISO to the students, faculty, and staff members on how to stay cyber safe. So let's get started. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I would like to start with a basic question. What is the role of CISO in helping the university safeguard from cyber threats? And how do you balance the need for cybersecurity with the desire for an open and collaborative academic environment?
All right, so let me take a second just to introduce myself and my role here. My name is Richard Anderson. I am the Chief Information Security Officer for the UNT system. My scope of responsibility is the UNT Denton campus, the UNT system administration, the Health Science Center in Fort Worth, UNT Dallas, and we have a lot of other small little operations around the state that we deal with. I am responsible for the security program at all of those institutions, and that generally covers about 65,000 people, across our entire enterprise. That's faculty, staff, and students. I also manage the IT compliance program as well, and have a role in disaster recovery and business continuity. So that's the general job description of a CISO, right? And so my security operations team is really the group that handles most of the security threats, handles incidents, and essentially tries to take care of us and keep us secure. And so my role, of course, is managing that operation, and it's also advising the university administration and the system administration on our, the status of our security program, our threats, the threats that we face, the risks that we have to manage, and the opportunities that we have from a security standpoint. I've been in the security field for about 25 years, and that was before there was a security field, actually. So I'm back from the early days here, and I've been working in a university setting for 22 years. So I've been in higher education. I've been a staff member. I've obviously been a student. I've been a teacher. I've been a researcher, and so I've got a fairly deep understanding of what we do as a university. So I understand our teaching mission, I understand our research mission, and I understand what we as a university have to give back to the community that we live in. And so we can't do our work unless we have an open and collaborative environment. However, the security threats that we face today are new, they're different. There are more threats that we face today from more areas, more adversaries than ever before. And in order for us to complete our mission, we have to keep our assets and our people secure.
Right.
So something that often gets lost when we talk about the relationship between security and higher education, the business of higher education, is that security is not just a barrier to getting things done. Having an effective, efficient security program is a competitive advantage to our students. It's a competitive advantage to our researchers, who have to have that fundamental foundation in place in order to get external funding and to meet the university's mission of creating new knowledge.
Agreed.
Right. And so that's at the top of my priority list. So I've taught cybersecurity at a graduate level for a number of years.
Mhm.
I'm not currently teaching, but
Mhm.
I have as recently as 2 years ago.
Mhm.
And when I started teaching security, when I started, working professionally in the field, um, you had a very simple definition of what security is,
Right.
which is protecting the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of, information and data, or some variation along those lines. That's the official ISC squared CISSP definition of security from the day.
Right.
And our field has been called security. It's been called information security. It's been called information assurance. It's been called cybersecurity. And now we're just cutting that down to cyber, right? And I struggled with that for a long time because I always felt that cybersecurity sounded like a marketing term. It sounded kind of not serious. And I remember heading into a course one semester, and this is the first semester they changed the name of my course from information security to cybersecurity for information professionals. And I hated it. I was like, oh, cybersecurity, I have to, it's in the title of the course. I have to, I have to talk about this. And I started thinking, what does that really mean? What does cybersecurity really mean? And how is that different than what we've talked about in the past? And as I started tracing down the origin of that term, cybersecurity becomes from actually a science fiction context. It comes from a science fiction novel, but the author of that novel took it from the concept of cybernetics,
Okay.
which is, if you know your information science history, cybernetics comes from a guy by the name of Norbert Wiener, who was an engineer during World War II, who invented the concept of feedback loops. And cybernetics to him was the relationship between, he stated as man and machine, but it's really a person and technology.
True.
And so when we start talking about cybersecurity, we're moving from that initial definition of confidentiality, integrity, and availability to understanding that there are human beings that are involved in the security process.
Agree.
Right. And when you start thinking about that, now you have to start thinking about what are the threats and the opportunities that come in when you start bringing people into the picture.
Correct.
And so to tie this back into your question, I not only think about, balancing the need for security with the academic mission, but I also think about how this technology actually affects the lives and welfare of the people that make up the academy, the institution. And so that's very much on my, in my vision.
And thank you so much. I think one thing I've understood is it's great to know about the kind of diverse experience you have and the rich experience you have both in academic as well as, in securing the networks as a CISO, right? So as you said, since you do have that kind of understanding and you did work as an academic as a professor and you worked in research, so you do know like what are the required elements that need to be protected and how can you do this. And one point that you made, which is very valid and it kind of stood out, is that both of them go hand in hand. If you want to have good academic and a research setup in the network around you, then you need to kind of secure it, right? Because without that, you cannot progress from an academia standpoint. So thank you so much. I think this is very well defined, and this kind of helps to understand how do you secure, like what thought process goes around when you are trying to secure academic standpoint, right? Generally, you do talk about corporate and the rest of the general networks, but when it comes to academic, you do have special focuses that you need to put your thought through. So this totally helps. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would add that when you start talking about a university, A university is very different than a corporate environment.
Correct.
So if you're trying to run a cybersecurity program for Ford Motor Company, for
Mm.
instance,
Mm-hmm.
your job is to make cars,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
That's what the company does, and your environment is very simple.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When you come into a university, you're really talking about kind of a subset of our culture as a whole.
Correct. Correct.
So we have departments that do computational chemistry, and we have sociologists, and we have doctors, and we have accountants, and we have just every job you can think of. We have a department to train those people into, to build the field.
Agreed.
A university is a city.
Exactly.
We have
Yeah, that's true.
we have an immense amount of buildings. We provide housing and food for people.
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
have athletic teams that live in our
Right.
environment, and so it's a very different challenge than dealing with something on a corporate level, because on a corporate level, you can actually get very specific with your controls.
True.
You can tighten things down to the nth degree. But when you're talking about securing a culture, which is what we do,
Exactly.
then you have to take the needs of that sociologist
True.
and that computational chemist and that football team into account when you make your decisions. So,
Agreed. Agreed. And it is a far more complex job, absolutely, I believe, especially from the university standpoint. And I think from the entire university, I would like to take this chance to thank you for doing such a great work and securing all of us.
oh, thank you.
So let's move to the next question. So what strategies and initiatives has the university implemented in ensuring that the students, faculty, and staff are cyber safe? And are there any sources where students can get information about the available facilities for them to stay cyber safe?
Okay, so I'll answer the second question first, which we have a website that has resources for students, and I've sent that to you in the chat, so you can share that with the community. We are improving that resource, and as I got that for you, I realized it's kind of buried, 7 or 8 levels deep, and I think I'd like to find a more direct home for that, so it's easier to find for people. But that's in the chat for you. So strategies and initiatives that we've put in place for helping students, faculty, and staff stay safe. So let me take a step backwards again and tell you that I've been in this role, the CISO role at the University of North Texas, for a little over a year now. And when I came on board, my first initiative was to build a proper security team, right? And so one of the things that we've done is we've put together a team that's adequate to to handle the workload, that's qualified, they're bright, some of the best people that I've worked with in my career. And so we built that team up. We spent about a year doing a deep dive into our security program and looking at what we're doing well, what we were doing, what we were doing poorly, what gaps we had, and what opportunities we had to improve. And so that's really been the thrust of the last year. And so we do the basics that you would expect a security team to do. So we've got our firewalls, we've got our antivirus program, we have a security awareness program. So we do the technical controls, we do the administrative controls. So what we're focusing on now is really looking at how the world has changed in the last 5 years. Of course, we've had the pandemic that moved us away from being in a castle, so to speak. All of us living behind a firewall, to all of us being working from our homes or working from locations all over the world. And believe it or not, we actually have people that work on
Right.
every continent on the planet, even
Right.
the cold one, so
Agreed.
and so we have to kind of shift our thinking to securing a narrow scope of assets
Mhm.
to securing people in diverse environments around the world with differing setups and differing resources. And so diving into kind of the technical language on what we're doing here is we're in the process of adopting a zero trust security model across the board, where you
Mhm.
make the assumption that you have no control over the environment in which your users are working from and living in.
Mhm.
So that forces you, instead of looking at, okay, if we're working within the firewall, we're fine,
Mhm.
to making the assumption that there's a lot of things that are happening in the background that we don't have control over. So we need to ensure that the asset the user is using is secure. We need to make sure that the user's account is secure. We need to make sure that the path between that they're communicating to us is clean and secure.
Mhm.
And so what we're doing is we're kind of re-engineering our security controls
Mhm.
to look at a zero trust security stance.
Mhm.
And so that's our long-term strategic vision and what we're trying to do from a technical standpoint, and also, to an extent, from a policy standpoint.
Right.
The other big initiative that we have from a strategic standpoint is, if you start looking at research and research funding, funding agencies are now very much requiring that you have a pretty extensive, documented, and verified set of security controls in place before they
Mhm.
grant funding for a research project.
Mhm. Mhm.
CMMC is one example of that. So the Department of Defense has,
Mhm.
has some rules in place and some standards in place that we have to adhere to. And so we've been in the process of building out secure research enclaves,
Mhm.
so that faculty and the students that work with them have a safe and secure place to do their research.
Mhm.
Um, see, what else can I tell you? I said a lot of things, but I'm not sure I answered your question completely. So
No, I think you did cover a lot to put it out there, right? So you did cover on the lines of what are the strategies and initiatives you have taken for the university, as well as like how are you catering for different needs within the university through the strategies and initiatives, right? So you did kind of answer it spot on, to be frank.
yeah,
So and as you've mentioned, I will definitely share the resource with the students community as well, so that they are also aware about where can they find all of the information. So this has been helpful for sure.
yeah.
So moving to the next question, can you highlight some best practices for students and staff to protect themselves from common cybersecurity threats, both on and off campus?
Okay. Um, so when we start talking, about a zero trust model, so there is no difference anymore between on and off campus, right? So um, it's the same. Um, I'm gonna talk a little history again.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so when I started working in information technology and started working in security in particular, um, and I can tell you as a student, I'll tell you how I got into information technology to begin with.
Mhm.
And I'll date myself here, but when I started college, there weren't internet service providers,
Okay.
right? There weren't the services that we have today.
Right now.
If you wanted internet access, you had to be at a university, and you had to be working in the right place
Right.
at the university to get that access. And so I wanted internet access, right? I really wanted it bad. So I got a job in a computer lab so I could have access to it, right? And so
Mhm.
at that point in time, though, I was starting college,
Mhm.
and I didn't have an identity. I didn't have a digital footprint, so to speak, or an internet footprint yet. So I didn't have an email account, for instance, or, any sort of, presence, right? And that's, and as time went on, universities started taking it upon themselves to provide that to their incoming students.
True.
Well, now, most of the students that come in are digital natives, and so they've had an identity, in some cases since the day they were born.
True.
Right. And so when you start thinking about, what kind of security advice do I give people, and just to remember that, their internet identity is their identity. And so, in the past, it was easy to give people advice. It's like, okay, so install some antivirus software on your on your machines and use good passwords and whatnot. But it's it's a little more complicated today.
Complicated now, true.
Because so much of our life is tied in with our, with our online identities. And so the advice that I would give people to stay safe, beyond the obvious, patch your machines, install antivirus software, use a password manager, strong passwords, use multi-factor authentication wherever you have the opportunity. Take me seriously when I tell you to use multi-factor authentication at the university, those kinds of things, is really more advice along the lines of, understanding how this technology actually affects you as a person. Right. So when you interact in a social media context, are you being influenced by that, by that content to change your behavior in some way that, is to the benefit of others or to the disadvantage of yourself and those around you? So you have to protect your identity. So once again, your passwords, your multi-factor authentication, you have to keep that secure. You have to recognize when somebody is trying to scam you. Right. So, if you ask me what the biggest threat to our users from a security standpoint is today, it's phishing. Whether it be through traditional email phishing or through, social media channels or whatnot. And the security advice I have is just to think about what you're doing. Be critical in evaluating the information that you're given, that you're receiving. Look at things with a critical eye, make wise decisions. Verify what you're reading before you act on it. Which is kind of odd security advice, I know, but that gets back to that cyber point that I was talking about earlier.
Right. And it totally adds up as well, right? How much ever controls and security you place in the picture, like how much ever you do it, by the end of the day, it is the human act that goes, because it is their personal information that goes out, right? So as you said, it is always important to stay vigilant of what is out there and how do you act, and also to make sure that everyone stops for a minute, understands what they're doing, or think about what they want to do, and then go ahead and act on it, right? So that totally adds up. It may look a very simple and non-technical suggestion, but that is what is going to go ahead and secure your own personal information. So that totally adds up.
All right.
So how can students and staff report potential security incidents or suspicious activity to the university's IT security team? And what should they do if they suspect they've fallen victim for a cyber attack?
Okay, so the simplest answer here is email security@unt.edu.
Okay.
And that will go to my security operations staff who will assist you in any way that we're capable of doing it. There are other ways to report security incidents. You can call the help desk. You can put in a ServiceNow ticket if you want to go that route. You can, we have a confidential portal that our compliance team runs that
Mhm.
allows submissions to it, and ultimately those will all get to my security team where we can actually handle it. So, um, and we're happy to get, whether it's a little thing or a big thing, we're happy to, to help our community in any way that we can.
Okay.
All right. Now, if you've suspected you've fallen victim to a cyber attack, and that's something that happens, that's not a hypothetical situation. We see that a lot and we deal with that a lot, and it really depends on what it is. But once again, you can just contact us directly,
Right.
and we will work with you and help you get to the resources. And one of the most common things that we see right now, I'm going to go off on a little tangent, but I think I might actually be answering question number 5 here as well. One of the most frequent things we see right now are job scams.
Right.
And these break my heart when I see them, when I see people fall victim to them, because it's, the basic scam is the malicious actor will contact, usually through email, our students, say, hey, I'm a professor at UNT and I've got a research assistant position open for this fall. It pays $300 a month.
Right.
Send me your contact information. We'll get you set up. And the next step of the scam is that the student will say, oh, well, I need a job.
Right.
And so many of us that are involved in the university have to work for the university. So it's finding a job is hard.
True.
And so you're dealing with a hungry constituency, people that need that. And so the student will send their contact information. Sometimes it's, a phone number, another email address. Sometimes it's like directly, it's like, oh, send me your bank account number so we can get you set up payroll. And the next step is the attacker uses that information to empty student's bank account. Or there's other things they do with that. They can use that to launder money. That's one thing that's pretty common that we see. And it just has it's a really horrible thing to happen to anybody. And so in cases like that, that's a law enforcement issue.
Right. Right.
And so if we know somebody that's fallen victim to a scam like that, we will, first of all, do an investigation on our part, but also work with the UNT police to work on it from a law enforcement standpoint. And, so if you feel like you've fallen victim, feel free to reach out to us and we will do what we can do to help you.
Absolutely. I think one thing I can vouch for UNT, I think it's been a year since I've been with UNT, is that everyone here is super supportive, and it's as simple as checking, and everyone responds. No matter which department I try and reach out to, every department responds. So I just want to add one thing to what you said about job scams, right? If anyone does get something like that, it is always better to check with the career center people or, the department that they belong, that is this something that happens or is this not it's as simple as checking with your trusted ones, right? So
Right.
that could be the first step. And as you said, also making sure that the security team is also alert that this is how it is going on, so that they can kind of look out for such more scams, which if in case it happens to the university students as such. So that totally helps as such. So finally, just to conclude, what advice or message would you like to share to the university community during the Cyber Awareness Month this year?
So one thing I would like to do is just thank the community for their vigilance. Once again, I've been in this business a long time, and we're at a spot where, we're not having to beg people to be secure anymore. We're actually at a point where we can guide and support those, those kinds of behaviors. And so I very much appreciate people taking the subject matter seriously and doing the things that they need to do to stay safe. But From an advice standpoint, if you see something suspicious, report it. Like, we're talking about the job scams, for instance. If you see a message, if you see a job scam message, chances are pretty good you're not the only one.
Correct,
And
correct.
so, the faster we know about it, the less likely it is that anybody else is going to fall for that.
Okay.
So, please share with us when you can. The second thing, there's some basic things that you should do to keep yourself safe. So on the technical side, manage your passwords well. Use multi-factor authentication everywhere you have the opportunity. Use password managers. Don't use the same password in different places.
Right.
Change your passwords as frequently as you feel comfortable doing so. Update your software, update your phones. So do the basics, but as I mentioned earlier, so much of this security now is about the relationship between technology and people.
Right.
So always, take in information with a critical eye, and understand when you're being influenced and when you're not, and just take ownership of that.
I think that was great to sum up as well, right? So just to stay vigilant and to go ahead and contact the university if in case whenever required. And this is a personal thing. Again, I'm gonna definitely say to all the folks who are listening to this is that I've been here for a year, and every department in UNT is super responsive, and it's just as simple as going ahead and sending an email or contacting over a call. So thank you so much, sir. You've been of immense help. This has been great. I've learned a lot in the process, and what are the do's and don'ts when you're in the university, right? So thank you so much for taking the time.
You're welcome. And can I say one more thing?
Yes.
Which is, I got my Ph.D. in the College of Information. So the College of Information has a special place in my heart, and I'm really honored that you reached out to me this month to talk to me. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And the department is great. I totally agree with you. And the college as well. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Right.